Hello Steak Club, we are back again with something really special for you. So what we have on the table is literally what's available, and what we have behind the table is the man who farmed it for us. This is James from Lyons Hill Farm, and this is one of his White Park. So James, can you tell us a little bit about the animal?
Sure.
What we have here?
Sure, no problem. This White Park cow is 10 years old. We're particularly proud of this one. She has failed to get into calf for the last couple of years, so she's in her optimum condition. As you can see, the marbling running through her, the fat covering on the outside. She hasn't been stressed at all by calving this year or last year.
A great, not huge, thick coverage for an animal that's 10 years old, right? Not a huge amount of fat across the top. And that's part of the breed.
Exactly, that's one of the characteristics of the White Park beef, is that the fat is more intramuscular than other breeds, and it sort of it doesn't get too fat on the outside, even if it's an old cow.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty rare, and that really differentiates this from like a retired dairy cow. It's not had a hard life of working, it's just been on pasture.
Exactly.
10 years, right? Your pasture, and that's in Dorset?
Exactly, just south of Sherburn. It's our ancient, unimproved conservation pasture. Very lush, very sort of mixed herbage. You put some commercial animals on our farm and they would absolutely hate it. They're a bit fussy. They're used to sort of a monoculture of, Italian ryegrass, whereas these guys thrive on our ancient pastures.
Great. Well, we're all about fussy. We're selling steak to pretty fussy people as well. So, what's the history of a White Park? Because I'm sure people hear it, they see it talked about, and it can sometimes get bandied in with what we call traditional breeds, but it's much rarer than that, right?
It is indeed. It is a rare breed. A lot of people misrepresent the word rare breed. There are in fact only 14 rare breeds as defined by the Rare Breed Survival Trust. White Park was at one point so rare it was classified as critical, but Churchill loved the breed so much he sent off. He was so worried about Nazi invasion. He sent off 2 cows and a bull to Canada, I believe. But since the establishment of the Rare Breed Survival Trust in the 70s, a lot of work has been done to ensure the survival of our native rare breeds. So White Park has grown in popularity because of its beauty and the quality of its beef.
Yeah, they're handsome animals as well.
Very handsome.
Good looking.
Yeah.
Which is important if you're the farmer as well. We've got to look at them every day for 10 years.
Which is why we chose it.
Great.
We bought the farm in 2006, and we were going to, the best beef that we tried a bunch of beef from different breeds, and we thought we'd go with the ruby red Devons until we were told about White Park by a specialist, and we were sort of like, what? Never heard of it before. But then we went to visit a herd up in Lancashire, and we decided that, the phenomenal beauty of these animals, it just made so much sense to have them, grazing our pasture. Awesome. And, it was actually up where we went to see the herd that the story of why it's known as a sirloin of beef and not a loin of beef is because King James I in 1617 was enjoying his roast loin of beef so much he decided that, do you know what, I knight you. Hence the word sirloin, and that is very much the White Park breed.
And then you've got the Baron, which is the double cut, which is obviously if you're twice knighted you become a Baron, so that's like a cross cut, like a Barnsley chop, but of the beef sirloin.
Learn something new every day.
I really like a lot of this. I was saying earlier, before we get on to how it tastes, how loads of words from butchery have actually made it into common parlance. So as Ollie, who's the guy who butchered this, was putting this table together and making it look beautiful earlier, I'll talk more about him later, I was saying that a butcher's table used to be called a shambles. So there's a little road up in Old Town, York, that they shot a lot of the Harry Potter film, and they're like the shopping scenes. I don't know, I have to admit. I haven't seen it, my wife loves it. But that street's called the Shambles, and it used to be where all the butchers had their displays, and I guess that then translated into someone being messy and that sort of thing, and you call someone a shambles, it's because they're a mess. This is about as far away from a shambles as you can get. Ollie has a fine arts degree, and he has blown this up, and the great thing about this is it is going to taste as good as it looks, right?
So, Flatiron is a restaurant we all know and love. The guy who started Flatiron is a chap called Charlie Carroll, who is absolutely obsessed with beef, and he did 200 or so steaks at the world's best steak competition, and he sent me a really nice email saying, look, it was so disappointing. The white part from your farm was one of the best steaks I've ever had, and none of the 200 or so steaks that he tried came anywhere close. So I'm really confident that you guys will enjoy this.
High praise indeed. So, let's talk a bit about some of the steaks we have here, because we have, despite it being from a super rare animal and a really special animal, these are the best bits plucked out of a whole side. So we have loads of different eating qualities, eating styles. They're all going to be great, and they're all at different price points as well. So don't be afraid to dive in. You don't have to be buying the T-bone and the Chateaubriand. We've got some really interesting things plucked out from bits of the animal. For example, just here, the spider steak or the pope's eye or the arancine, and there are only 2 of those on the whole animal. That's less than 250 grams. It is from just inside the eye of the hip, so around the rump, and it's exceptional in its own way, right? It's not like a vet. Hot and fast.
Okay.
For me, anything like that, these flank steaks here, so the arancine, the ham, the true bavette, which just looks incredible. If you've got a few people coming over for a barbecue this weekend, take that whole piece. It's only available as a whole piece. You know, even the thin skirt that we got there with the inside, hot and fast. You can leave it pretty much rare in the middle. Obviously it's going to take less time on this, less time on the thin skirt, a bit more on the bavette, but just means you're going to get more colour on the outside. And to get a bavette that well marbled for such a traditionally lean steak, that speaks to the life of the animal, right?
And another tip I would always suggest when you've got to cut like from the flank is to always chop it perpendicular to the grain of the meat. And that way it'll just melt in your mouth like butter, because all the you're not fighting against long fibers, you're only chewing short fibers. So that is, a lot of people...
So that's this way across. So cook it as a whole piece if you need to then cut it into sections, but then that way across the grain. And that's pretty true for anything, right? Even if you're cooking a nice thick sirloin, with these are all going to be 300 gram sirloins, lay it out flat, slice it like a tagliata, and that'll take it across the grain, and it just improves the mouthfeel.
Oh, completely.
Right?
Completely.
So out of those flanks, we've got the true bavette here, the flank, the inside skirt, and then we move on to things that look kind of similar but have a really different texture. So we've got the 2 flat irons here, and then the underblade as well. Now the flat iron, I mean, Charlie built a whole restaurant around it, right? It is just an exceptional muscle tucked away inside the shoulder, sat right against the shoulder blade. For years, it's the kind of thing that just got stripped out of the abattoir and put into bits.
Yeah, totally.
Great to be able to celebrate it. There's a real butchery skill attached to it, and Ollie has done a fine job taking that thick bit of sinew out that runs between the 2 steaks. It looks like a feather. That's why it's called the feather blade, obviously. So a little bit more about Ollie, actually, before I jump on. Ollie is the manager of the Notting Hill store, and he is our beef guy, especially for this kind of butchery, breaking everything down into individual bits. If you ever get the chance to drop into the shop, come and see Ollie. He always has an incredible selection of things. He has a beautiful eye for presentation as well. And check him out on Instagram, Ollie Harley something, we'll put the link in there, 88 maybe. He's a mean chef. So,
I'm going to jump in here. One more thing on the flat iron. The way it was discovered is really quite interesting. So the US Department of Agriculture, we've got to give it to the Americans, we have to. The US Department of Agriculture sponsored these 2 master butchers to seam out every single muscle from the entire cow in order to add value to the forequarter. So they found 2 things. They found the flat iron and they found the Denver. Now the Denver comes from the chuck, the flat iron comes from the blade. And they've got a test, it's called the Werner-Bratzler Shear Force Test, and it basically tests how much energy is required to rip a piece of meat. So the flat iron is less expensive than the fillet, it's the second most tender cut across the whole animal, and it packs infinitely more flavour.
Loads of marbling.
Loads of marbling. It's a working muscle, unlike the fillet, which only gets worked really during mating. Which in a bull's case is all over very quickly. The Denver's another one. This is the fourth most tender cut on the whole animal. It comes from the chuck, which is probably, I believe, the most highly marbled cut across the whole carcass.
Beautiful.
And again, we owe it to the Americans that we would have otherwise chucked this through the mincer.
Well, it all used to go into processing, right? I think that's those sort of shifting sands of food fashion, I guess, because it wasn't all that long ago that you were just pulling out the sirloin, the brisket and that sort of thing, and the rest was disposed of into wet cooks and that sort of thing, despite other cultures being really into it. I mean, you go to Cuba, they're slow cooking that and making it into sort of like long, stringy stews and celebrating the texture of it, not trying to cook it to death.
Yeah.
But the Denver's another one. We're selling that as a whole piece, and that's, well, let's move on to there as well. So we've got a couple of big bits, big sharing steaks to take for the weekend. So you've got the big bavette we've talked about, the true bavette, then you've got the Denver and the picanha. So you can take this as a piece, and I would actually suggest taking the Denver, we put some cut lines in there as examples, turning that into steaks and cooking them on the barbecue and then slicing across the grain again. The picanha, I would be tempted to sort of do a hybrid cook. So you're going to want it to be on the coals to get as much char as possible, then pull it across to the cold side of your barbecue, lid on, and you want to get some heat into that. You can eat it, if you have to eat it well done, you can eat it well done and it's still going to be tender. But if you go to any of the churrascarias, or you spend any time anywhere in Brazil, that one that comes round on the skewer and is sliced off onto your plate, that's the picanha. It's really celebrated in that part of the world. That, and they have the cows that have the hump. Have you seen those on their neck? And that's sort of like the other super marble part of it. But the white part doesn't have that, but it does have a picanha.
You guys are the steak club, so you've obviously seen the way the Argentinians cook their asados. I spent a while in Argentina actually, which is where I developed a true passion and love for beef. And this, the picanha's got a totally covered outside of fat, and I would cook it on the lean side and then put it on the fat side. And then what they do in Argentina is they raise, as Struan was saying, you cook it, give it a real good sear, right direct, very near the coals, and then raise, if you have that option on your barbecue, raise it up really high so that it then just sort of slow cooks.
Like in the ambient heat, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and then we'll talk a little bit about some stewing stuff that we've got, some slow cookers, because even though this is Steak Club, because we're taking the whole carcass, a lot of the other stuff is going to be going into burgers, but we've picked out a few greatest hits in the slow cooking world, and that is because I know that on our WhatsApp group, if you haven't joined the WhatsApp group, join it. It's great to see so many people cooking killer food, but there's plenty of people there cooking on Komodo ovens. I'm a green egg user. The guys have seen me in my garden cooking on the green egg. So we have the brisket. So we've got a whole brisket here, but we're going to cut it in half. That will make a great smoker, slow cooker on your barbecue. Then we got just two of the short ribs, the juiciest end of it, the meatiest end, and that marbling just looks incredible. So if you've got nothing planned on Saturday, fire it up early, stick your meter in the middle of it, and let it go all day long. We also now stock meter on the website as well. Great plug, thanks very much. And then we have the bone and rolled short ribs. So this is where we needed to take a little bit more of the really chunky bits of fat out. And that'll work as a great roast, but again, you can do that on the barbecue, but it's gonna have to be well away from the coals because it's gonna give out loads of fat, right? And you don't want that. I think sometimes with fattier beef, you've got to be careful that your coals are cool enough. Because if you start making flames, you get that slightly bitter flavour from the burnt fat, which is, it's not burning on the meat, but it imparts the flavour on the meat. So slow and low, that is the tempo, as the Beastie Boys.
Especially for an animal this age, and it's, nothing winds me up more when you sell someone some incredible sort of rolled brisket and they ring you up and say, oh, it's tough. It's like, you can't cook.
Yeah, go long.
If you cook it properly, it will not be tough.
Yeah, you have to give it time though. It's had so much
patience.
It's had so much time. It's had 10 years.
Yeah.
That's the thing. This has been out in your farm for a decade.
Yeah.
It looks like it's been beautifully processed at the abattoir, and then we are just the medium of being able to cut it up and get it to the people that are going to enjoy it, right? And then the next step is however you want to cook it to bring the best out of it. You've got everything from flash frying to something you could go all day with. And then we'll talk a little bit about the steakhouse steak, I guess. It's the big guns. It's not the stuff I'm taking home. I'm over there in the bavette and that sort of thing. I don't know about you.
Me too.
And the Terrace Major, another super lean, super tender steak. There's not much of it. That is it for this drop. It's on the website. So the big guns. I mean, part of the reason I'm not taking it is that they are at the top end of the market as well. And I love to eat that stuff. So we have T-bone, bone-in ribeye, and sirloin for the boneless option. So the T-bone, we're going to have 4 1.5 kilo ones, and it is just exceptional level of marbling right through into the fillet as well. I mean, that again, that's the years, right?
Yeah.
That's all about the time, and it's going to come with the big cap of fat on, and it's beautiful yellow fat because what it's been eating is rich in carotene, and that translates into the flavor. Cook it with the fat on. Take it off if you really have to, but James was talking off camera earlier. Once you do get it to where you roughly want it to be in terms of the meat, on its side, tongs.
Like a book, spine down.
Yeah, and get that over some fierce heat. Get as much browning on as you can there, as much Maillard reaction as you can, as much umami as you can get. Then we're going to have 4 1.7 kilo bone-in ribeyes, and these just look ridiculously good. We all looked at, Ollie and I were talking about this earlier, a huge spinalis compared to the eye, and it's running right through to the other end, and that is, widely considered to be one of the best bits of meat on the whole animal in terms of texture and flavor and tenderness. Is that anything to do with the breed or the age or just this particular animal?
All I know is the animal that it came from, and she was like a barrel.
Great.
She was incredible.
Excellent. So we've got those two, and then the boneless sirloin. If you just need one absolute killer steakhouse steak, that's the one. 300 grams, bit of sear on the outside. It's going to be beautiful. And then obviously we have the chateau as well. Really, really special. Like incredible marbling. Normally I'd say walk a fillet through a warm room, but I think that's going to need a little bit of heat into it to get some of that marbling juicy rather than too waxy. And again, you're not eating this like it's a piece of steak that even our really beautiful beef that's at 3 years, it's lean and can be cooked quick. Even that fillet should have more heat running through it, right?
Yeah.
Great.
You can still cook it to rare, medium rare. You've just got to go low and gentle. But give it a really fast, aggressive sear on the outside always. That's the way I cook a steak is, for example, one of these, there is a lot of fat. Give it a really aggressive, high heat. I wouldn't even put any oil down. I just cook to begin with on the back, and then that fat renders down, then you're cooking the beef within the fat that's rendered from the spine of the steak. And once that's all really nicely caramelized all the way on the outside, just get your tongs, hold it on its back and turn the heat down. So it's not browning the fat anymore, it's just rendering it and cooking it. It becomes more caramelized, and then you can eat all that. There is a lot of fat.
I will eat all that.
Yeah, good.
Definitely.
I would. I mean, just render it down a little bit, caramelize it, and it'll be the best fat you've ever tried, I can guarantee it.
Beautiful. And if you miss out on any of the steaks, all this fat, all this quality beef, everything off the rest of the carcass is going into burgers. They're going to be available all week. James, thank you.
A pleasure.
Thanks for your time, and thanks for this beautiful beef. Ollie commented this morning that it's some of the best beef we've ever had in the shop.
Well, it's
and
an honour.
He knows his stuff.
Yeah, well clearly this is some incredible butchery work here. I have to say most butchers do not have a clue how to seam out these complicated muscles.
Well, let's celebrate it, that's what we're here for. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Buy some steak.